Hello, everyone, and welcome to Audio Judo. I'm Matthew,
And I'm Kyle.
and this is your podcast of music discovery. Off to a good start again.
We're off to a
Uh,
great start.
we are proud members of the Pantheon Podcast Network, your premium source of music, entertainment, and movie podcasts. I think eventually soon. Besides this podcast, which is now recording episode number 154, we also
Oh my
produce
God.
two other podcasts, Audio Judo Does Jazz and Throughline. You can find both of those podcasts on Pantheon as well, or on our website, audiojudo.com, or anywhere else that podcasts are podcast.
Hmm.
This week, Kyle, I know that you have something
Yes,
special for us.
I
Tell us what
do.
album you picked.
So this week we are talking about Funkadelic's Maggot Brain. This
Oh,
is a
oh
I got
yeah.
to be honest with you. This is a total wild card album. I had heard a couple of songs from this before, but I picked it a lot. I put this on my list a long time ago when we were talking about Childish Gambino's "Awaken My Love," because he said that this album was incredibly influential when he was making that album. At the time, I went back, I added it to my iTunes library. Didn't really think about it for a long time. It sat on that list of like, hey, these are albums we should probably do on the podcast, and it's been there for a long time. So I finally got around to it. I was like, we should just do it, and
Yeah.
I think it's a good choice here. It's unique. It's something I don't think we've ever discussed before. I don't think we've had a funk album before. Have we?
Not true funk. We'll address that. Not a true
Nope.
funk record. Got to be honest with you though. This title has been on our list, like you said. It's been on our list since the very first list, the very
Yeah.
beginnings of Audio Judo. When you and I sat down and put together a list, and that list went on our common drive, and it just kind of sat there. And as we progressed, I crossed out albums or removed them after we talked about them, added some, and this one just lingered. It just
Yeah.
it kept moving up the list and then down the list and up the list. But when you finally made the decision, to put it on the calendar, it was very exciting because this is an album that just begs to be talked about. It's
It
one of the
does.
seminal albums in funk history. It's a milestone musical achievement, and it's a blast to listen to this record if you can
Yeah,
get
it
in the
is.
right mood for it. You have to be in the right mood for the funk.
Would you
But
say that's a funky mood
yeah, you got to be in
or
the
a
funk.
funky
Well,
mood?
funk, but we're going to talk about the difference
Okay.
between funk and the funk
Oh,
later.
good.
So this album was released in July of '71. Got up to
Hmm.
into the top 20 of the R&B chart. Got to number 108 on the Billboard Top 200. Initial reviews of this record, understandably, maybe not great.
Yeah.
Rolling Stone eviscerated the album, called it shattered, desolate landscape with few pleasures. And of course, our old friend Christgau
Hmm.
was fairly complimentary, saying it was a druggy, timed warp super schlock, which I'm fine with. And retrospective reviews through the years now see it as one of the loudest, darkest, most intense records ever made, which
Yeah.
is a bit over the top.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, to me, this one thing is I never got any like. There's some dark imagery in here, but I would never picture this as like it's one of the darkest albums ever made.
No,
It's
not at
one of
all.
the creepiest, most horrifying. Like, no, what are you talking about?
Not at all. Not
It's a
even
great album, and
close.
yes, there is
Yeah,
some dark imagery here. If you look at the background behind the album, you look at what maybe happened to influence the name of the album that we'll get back around to here in a
sure,
few
sure.
minutes. You know, but it's definitely not what I think a lot of people think that it is.
No, Rolling
Um,
Stone put it, came to their senses years later, put it at number 136 on their
yeah.
top 500 list or top 500 albums of all time.
What's very interesting too is it really slowly climbed that list because it started out at like 496, I want to say, and then it jumped up to like two something, and then it jumped up to like it's at like 136 now, right?
136, yeah. And I
So
and I think
obviously, as it's aging, it's getting better.
it, similarly, um, other albums we've talked about, like the quote unquote best record ever made, Marvin Gaye's "Let's Get It On," which we talked about,
Yeah.
um, is a great record, but it climbed the list until someone decided, oh, it's the best one.
Hmm.
and I'm gonna compare. Like, there's some comparison and contrasting with this record as well, with that record, especially with the times where it was created. You know what was going on, but there are some similarities. It's impossible
Yeah.
to deny the influence this record had. All genres name this album as an influence. Vernon Reid from Living Color called it a magnum opus of rock and roll.
Yeah.
Dean Ween from Ween,
From
which
Ween.
is completely not this, uh, credited with influencing him. It's, you know, there's a lot to it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
we
and
should
like I
talk
said,
about
Childish Gambino, who made a hip hop album essentially, but it is so you can hear if you listen to "Awaken My Love" and you listen to this one right after the other, you see that yes, he drew tons of inspiration from this, and
100%.
there are a lot of the like the chanting vocals and things that you hear throughout here, the acoustic sound effects, the style of it overall is just
The
it's
album
there,
cover,
it's amazing. The album cover, yeah,
they're all he says that. He said
yeah,
this was the record. Maggot Brain was the record that he was emulating with "Awaken My Love." So
yeah,
we should talk about the band that responsible for Maggot
yeah.
Brain,
Funkadelic. Uh,
Funkadelic.
Originally formed by George Clinton in 1964 as a sort of unnamed backing section for his doo-wop group, the Parliaments. The original lineup consisted of, I just realized I wrote Ranky Boyce, but I'm pretty sure that's supposed to be Frankie Boyce,
Frankie
Richard
Booth,
Boyce.
Richard Boyce, and Langston Booth.
Yes.
I got
No,
two
it's
Booths
Frankie
and a
Boyce.
Boyce.
No, it's two Boyces in a booth.
Is it two Boyces in a booth?
Yeah. It's
Okay.
Frankie Boyce, Richard Boyce, and Langston Booth, I think. But I wrote Ranky Boyce.
Oh,
Yeah.
Frankie Boyce. So two Boyces in a booth.
Two Boyces in a booth.
I got it. All right.
Plus 5 members of the Parliaments singing vocals. Um, both of the Boyce brothers and Booth all enlisted in the Army in 1966, right in the height of the Vietnam War. So then George Clinton and the rest of the Parliament vocalists were kind of like, okay, well, what the hell are we going to do? So they went out and recruited William Billy Bass Nelson on bass, Edwin Earl Eddie Hazel on guitar, Lucius Tall Ross on guitar, and Raymond Tiki Fullwood on drums. Billy is actually the one who came up with the name Funkadelic. While the band was, they went through a relocation. They moved to Detroit to continue their careers, but they didn't actually begin using it until 1968 when there was a dispute between their record company Revelot. I hope I'm pronouncing that right.
Yeah.
Over the name the Parliaments.
The,
So they actually
Parliaments.
signed under the name Funkadelic. Parliament's like the cigarette, I
Yeah.
assume,
Yeah.
but which
Well,
I
you
hope
got
to
all
God
that
that
right.
was.
So George Clinton, who's, he's the man. He is
Yeah.
the man. He was born in North Carolina in 1941, grew up in and around Plainfield, New Jersey, and he used to work at a barber shop on Plainfield Avenue in Plainfield, New Jersey, where he formed his first doo-wop group that would eventually become the Parliaments. He became part owner of that barber shop, and when it became a huge hangout spot for all the local musicians, and it was called Silk Palace. And during
Ooh.
the 1960s, he would become a staff writer for Motown. Also arranged and produced a number of songs with very little success, except for a song called I Want to Testify. And
Hmm.
that limited success helped turn him from exploring or from writing for other people to exploring his own musical tastes, and fell in love with the above mentioned musicians that you mentioned, Tiki Fullwood and Eddie Hazel.
Yeah.
And they started a funk band, which would lead to other funk bands. And then
Yeah.
finally, a funk movement.
Yeah. They signed under the name Funkadelic in 1968 with a company called Westbound Records. At the same time, they began to evolve from that doo-wop group into more guitar-driven rock, soul, funk type of music, like you just said. Um, they were super heavily influenced by Vanilla Fudge, Sly Stone, Jimi Hendrix, and a bunch of other bands at the time who were
Yeah,
also starting to kind of evolve their sound and come up with new
Detroit-based
things.
Detroit-based bands like MC5 were
Exactly.
hugely influential. Those are one of the biggest progenitors of that kind of punk movement.
Yeah.
MC5 and the Stooges coming out of Detroit, and that sound was very influential to Funkadelic, and kind of turned Motown on its ear a little bit, because the sounds were becoming not as sweet and
Yeah.
more abrasive, and they kind of took that more abrasive punk sound and blended it with this Motown sound, and that's kind of how all these things starting to work together. I'm sorry,
Yeah,
go on.
there was also this idea, I mean, it was the 60s, so the sexual revolution was happening. And you can hear it in the music because it goes from that, my girl loves me, da, 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 to like, I want to have sex tonight. We're gonna make love all night, and then to like, let's fuck, baby. I mean, it literally just evolves. I
I
mean,
think I just
into
heard that
something that's
sound.
very much,
I just
I
heard that
mean,
song recently.
let's fuck, baby. It's a
I
great
think
song.
I think it's the end. It's the end song of this record.
Just about, yeah. Uh, that's what inspired me. But yeah, they continued to refine their sound, and they released their first self-titled album, Funkadelic, in 1970. Sold okay. It was largely misunderstood by a lot of audiences and critics who were still kind of in that doo-wop. The audiences hadn't quite evolved yet. Um, but a bunch of other people played on it as well. Credits listed organist Mickey Atkins plus George Clinton, Fullwood, Hazel, Nelson, and Ross on the album. Recording also included the rest of Parliament singers who were still uncredited because of contractual concerns, so they didn't get any credit for this album. There were also several uncredited session musicians that were employed by Motown. Ray Monette of the band Rare Earth was also uncredited playing on here, and the future P-Funk mainstay Bernie Worrell was also uncredited on this album. However, that was kind of how he got introduced to the band, and Bernie Worrell would come back and get credit for their next album, also released in 1970, called Free Your Mind, Your Ass Will Follow.
It's a freaking great record. If you have
Oh,
not
it's so
listened to
good.
this record, uh, this was George Clinton's attempt to record an entire album while completely stoned on acid from
Mm-hmm.
top to bottom. The entire record. And it's weird. This album is drenched in feedback, top to bottom. It's very challenging to listen to in parts.
Mm.
But how is that different? Think about the time. How is it different from Sonic Youth in the late 80s or
Sure.
or the feedback soaked albums of Neil Young in the 90s? I tell you how it was different. It's too early. It was
Yeah.
too early. It was so far ahead of its time, and these guys were just whacked out on LSD like the bejesus stoned out of them,
Yeah.
trying to
I
play.
definitely agree with that. I mean, had this album come out 10 years later in 1980 instead of 1970, I think it would have been way more successful than it was.
That and
Um,
the album itself, for your mind and your ass will follow. It's very subversive. It
yeah.
was the whole album was designed to, as he said it, was suggesting he suggested that the kingdom of heaven is within yourself, right,
Hmm.
instead of outside. So it was blasphemy that you could find salvation in yourself instead of going to church and paying for it. The gall of George Clinton to suggest that. Free your
Plus, it
mind,
had a naked lady on the cover.
right? Free your mind, bro, and your ass will follow. Right out the door of that church. Right out
Yeah.
the door.
One thing that did and always never ceases to amaze me. 1970. Remember when this came out? So 55 years ago.
Ugh,
Um,
thanks.
so went to number 11 on the Billboard Black Albums chart.
That is correct.
So that was still a thing in 1970,
Mm-hmm.
and number 92 on the Pop Albums chart. So did fairly well, but still never ceased to amaze me that by 1970 we were still segregating music to the albums chart and the Black Albums chart.
Yes.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it also had some more positive reviews than their previous album. It also sort of set the stage for their next album that we're going to talk about, Maggot Brain.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like you said earlier, released July 12th, 1971. So with it between 1970 and mid 1971, they did their first 3 albums. So 18 months, 3 albums. That's pretty good. Um, it was produced in, it was recorded at United Sound Systems in Detroit at the end of 1970 and into early 1971. Produced by George Clinton himself. Peaked at 108 on the Billboard 200. Reached top 20 on the Billboard R&B album charts.
Yeah. Sad about that.
Yeah.
That studio still stands,
Mm-hmm.
but it is abandoned and just it's a relic at this point, and they've been
Oh.
trying for years and years and years to get national landmark status for it,
Mm-hmm.
and it keeps failing and keeps failing and
Oh.
keeps failing. So it's currently just just a structure at this point, which sucks.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Well, good news. They're getting a whole bunch of money dumped into those kind of departments right now. So
Oh, is that right?
yeah,
Oh,
just tons and tons and
is
tons of
that
money.
happening?
Yeah. Yeah,
USAFD.
definitely.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Uh Anywho,
What?
uh yeah, nothing. I
Okay.
didn't say anything.
So
Yeah.
peaked at number 20 on the Soul chart.
Mhm.
Right? Didn't even
Did
chart at all in the UK.
no, which is kind of a surprise because I would feel like an album like this would do really well in the UK,
I
but
thought, right? I think so too. What did you find
guess
out about
not.
the title? Would you like to share that now?
Yeah, so one other sad thing I think I should probably mention before we go too much farther,
Yeah.
unfortunately, is so this was actually the last album recorded by this version of Funkadelic. Billy Nelson, shortly after recording this, quit the band over a money dispute with George Clinton, and Tall Ross had a traumatic drug experience where he got into an acid eating contest.
It's not a.
Immediately,
It's never smart.
no,
It's not a good
immediately
idea.
after which he then snorted some raw speed and then quote completely flipped out end quote and never played with the band again. So
I'm not surprised by
kind of a
anything,
sad
actually.
end. Yeah. One other thing I should probably mention here too is that this was a mystery to me. So this is a call out to anybody who can answer this. Um, on the album cover, Bernie Mendelsohn was in charge of the Gangas. So who is Bernie Mendelsohn? He's credited on a whole lot of funk, soul, and gospel albums produced in and around Detroit between 1960 and 1990. I'm assuming he has credits as mixer, editor, producer, session musician, sometimes maybe, but there's no other information about him. So it's just credits as for those things. So I don't know exactly who he is, who he was, but I would be very interested to know. The other interesting question is what are Igangas? I was for sure I'm like, oh, this is going to be like some kind of a traditional like rhythm instrument or something, right? No. You search for that, it comes up with information about this album, Maggot Brain, and then it comes up with Gangas, which is Venezuelan gangs that are apparently having problems in Texas and Venezuela.
Is it
So
possible that it was a just a misspelling of congas?
could be a misspelling of congas. I also wondered if it wasn't some kind of a
Egongas.
misrepresentation of the word ganja.
Ah.
So, like Bernie Mendelsohn in charge of the ganja. So he
Ah.
was providing pot to the band, but they couldn't just say he was providing pot to the band.
Pretty sure
But
everybody was supplying pot to the band.
yeah, but again, absolutely no references anywhere to what that actually means. So if anybody out there knows, and especially if you have a source that we could reference for it, let me know. I would love to
Listen
know
to
it.
you with your
Just
proper journalism.
right.
Got your
I
source
try.
and a
All
second
right.
source, please.
Source and a second source, please. And if we could get the name and address of the person that put that on there, so I
Got to
could
do
write
our
them and
due
get a
diligence.
first person. I try. All right.
Well, good for you.
But yeah. So the artwork and the name of the album.
Mm-hmm.
So two possible sources came up over and over and over for the source of the name for this album. One is that Maggot Brain was the nickname of Eddie Hazel, potentially due to the amount of drugs that he does or the stupidity of him, which we'll come back to in a little bit.
Uh-huh.
Other sources say the title, and this is where some of the darkness comes from, is a reference to the band leader George Clinton finding his brother Robert's decomposed dead body with his skull cracked open in an apartment in Newark, New Jersey.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a little traumatic there.
Well, yes. And you don't know how much of this is true. Well, it's true that his brother. That's how his brother died.
Yeah,
But I don't know if George ever saw it in the apartment. Hard to know. I assume,
yeah.
but it could be anything. But yeah, people didn't know what to do with this record. I think with all the bad reviews that it got. I'm still convinced a lot of those reviewers didn't listen to the whole thing
Mm-hmm.
objectively. I think some of the reviews of so-called black music from that time had a very preconceived notion of what they really meant and never gave those records, this record or something different, their day in the sun. They were either looking for something Motown or they were looking for another Hendrix.
Yeah.
And there was never going to be one of those. So they didn't take time to really dig into what was really there. And there was so much great music going on, and they're like, no, no, we don't like the cover, we don't like this. Screw it. We're not even gonna listen to it. It's a freak out. I think they're
Yeah.
devil worshippers. Like, okay, guy, shut up.
They must worship Satan. Maggots. That
Maggots.
has to do with dead bodies,
Right?
which
They
is
said
Satan.
maggots, so it's got to be
Yeah.
bad. So the cover art, though.
Yeah, it's a picture of a screaming woman coming out of the ground or going into the ground. Oh, hey, you got it right there. Look at that. Nice. With some, at first I always thought those were maggots around her on the ground, but it's
Right?
just dirt and sticks and stuff.
It's
So,
just sticks.
yeah. It was photographed by Joel Brodsky, and the model for that is Barbara Chesborough, a very famous model from the 60s and 70s.
She was on the cover of their first record.
Yeah. The album's liner notes on the back, there's a short doctrine on fear provided by the Process Church of the Final Judgment. And Matthew was pointing out earlier that I've never looked at it up close on the actual album cover. It's almost impossible to read because it is yellow on brown text. The Process Church of the Final Judgment, who you've probably never heard of before, they were a British religious group. It was founded in 1966 and disestablished in the 1970s.
Mm-hmm.
The founders of it were an English couple named Mary Ann McLean and Robert de Grimston,
Mm-hmm.
who actually met as members of the Church of Scientology. They spread this group's practices across parts of the United Kingdom and the United States in the late 60s and early 70s. They were called a, quote, kind of neo-Gnostic theology.
Mm.
Um, they had some weird fucking ideas, man.
Of course they did.
Very
It's the '60s,
hippy dip.
man.
Yeah, very hippy dippy, weird stuff. You, there were also allegations that there was a link between them and the Manson family.
Right.
Um, yeah, which
Which,
actually ended up proving to be either positive or detrimental to Funkadelic, because according to American historian and DJ Ricky Vincent, from his book, the organization's alleged association with the Manson family, along with the album's foreboding themes and striking artwork, lent Funkadelic the image of a, quote, death worshipping black rock band, end quote.
right. What? Yes, people did not miss the fact that though the quote on the back from Process Church of the Final Judgment was intertwined with the Manson family, whether
Yeah,
true or not. And them being called a Black Death rock band couldn't be further from the truth. And one of the excerpts in the liner notes, if you've never read them, the quote that got the most attention was, "Fear is at the root of man's destruction of himself. Without fear, there is no blame. Without blame, there is no conflict. Without blame, there is no destruction. But there is fear. Deep within the core of every human being, it lurks like a monster, dark and intangible. Its outward effects are unmistakable. Its source is hidden." Right? And how there's nothing inherently wrong with that quote,
yeah.
except telling you that fear is inside, fear is manifested inside and projected outward. Okay. So if I believe that, does that make me a Satan worshiping, you know?
This is now a
I don't get it.
death metal Satan worshiping podcast, Matthew.
It's
Welcome
insane.
aboard.
And it's nuts how that just kind of gets away from you.
Right?
Like that just okay, you used a quote. They're tied to the Manson family. Bada boom, bada bang.
Well,
You must be devil worshippers.
this was also this was a little bit before the Satanic Panic, but that whole period from the late 70s through the early 90s, where the Satanic Panic was happening, which, if you don't know what that is, go look it up. It's a fascinating,
Yeah.
like, essentially a mass hallucination. And its roots well, let me rephrase that. Its seeds are what planted the roots of the things that we see today, with the way that a lot of conservative groups spread information. So, but in the
100%.
70s and early 80s, it was quite literally they would pick something that they felt could potentially be detrimental to, say, teenagers. And then they would just absolutely bash it from everything from, potentially factual things that aren't necessarily related to it, and there's no correlation between the two, to outright lies. And then they would gather people within their own group who would go out and promote it and gather more people, and then they would gather more people until it built up to this head, and then all of a sudden they would be writing their congress people and protesting in front of city hall and things, and people would be like, what the hell are you talking about? And they'd be like, this Kiss album caused 5,000 children to burn their genitals off with a candle. And you'd be like, I'm sorry, what?
I had that.
This Kiss album is the reason 5,000 American children no longer have genitals, because the Kiss album told them when they listened to it backwards on a tape player, it told them to burn their genitals off with a candle. And
I think that's
true.
Know,
it's 100% true. I mean, Gene Simmons has admitted it, but we're professional journalists, and I just said that out loud. Clearly, obviously it's true.
It happened.
No, but I mean, things like that happened all the time, and it was really carefully studied by a lot of sociologists and by the FBI, and FBI profilers still to this day use it as sometimes they find situations where there are, mass hallucination incidents where some city believes that they've seen a UFO, or that there's a person, stalking everyone in the woods or something like that, and they come in and investigate. Sometimes, I know that sounds very X-Files, but it actually happens. Yeah. But it really does happen, and they have studied it so much that we can now look at it and say, this is exactly how it happens. And this type of a thing is the start of that. It was literally people saying, oh, well, there's one thing that might be have some correlation to Satanism, and we can also maybe incredibly loosely tie it to the Manson family, and therefore this band is evil.
So why? But the problem I have with that is that it's so absolutely selective, because we know for a fact that Dennis Wilson from the Beach Boys and Charles Manson were friends that hung out, and Dennis Wilson even produced one of his songs, and yet no one says, ergo, the Beach Boys must be satanic.
Well, they Nobody are, but that's beyond the point. I mean, I just said it, but go on. Sorry,
but nobody says that. Nobody.
Yeah.
Why?
Is
it because of the style of music that's being played? Oh, it's louder. It's abrasive. It seems quirky. But these guys are singing about surfing, so they can't be satanic, right? Like that's so ridiculous. Oh, it drives me nuts.
I mean, there is one other thing that might be at play here. And I'm just gonna put this out there. If you look at a picture of the Beach Boys, and you look at a picture of Funkadelic,
there it is.
What do we see there that's a little different in those two groups? I mean, they're all, just a couple of groups of guys, right? There's no differences there. Is there anything that could be, an underlying thread to everything that's happened in America and Western culture for the last couple thousand years that might separate those two groups, that would make one of those groups, some representatives of one of those group lash out at another representatives of another group? I don't know. Maybe, just maybe.
I really don't know what you're talking about.
I don't know what I'm talking about either most of the time.
So, well, on that note, you want to take a little break and come back and do track by track?
Yeah, it sounds like a good plan.
Great. Let's finish fending every race.
Today's show is brought to you by Atomic Podcast Services. Are you tired of spending hours hunched over your computer struggling to edit your podcast episodes? Do you want more time to create instead of editing? Well, we have the solution for you. Introducing Atomic Podcast Services, a premium podcast editing service that will take your show to the next level.
With Atomic Podcast Services, you can say goodbye to tedious editing tasks and hello to a polished, professional-sounding podcast. They will expertly enhance your audio quality, seamlessly remove background noise, and ensure every episode sounds crystal clear. But that's not all. As part of their premium service, they will also help you with ID3 tagging, scheduling, and posting of episodes, and for a little extra, even create engaging audiograms to promote your episodes on social media platforms. There's even a discount if you subscribe to their monthly services. With Atomic Podcast Services, you'll have more time to focus on what you do best, creating incredible content.
So why waste another minute struggling with complex editing software? Let Atomic Podcast Services take care of the technical side while you focus on captivating your audience. Visit their website at atomicpods, that's pods with a Z.com, to learn more and book your editing session today. Hello, this is Matthew from Audio Judo. Are you looking for additional Audio Judo content? Stuff that will make you laugh with an emphasis on music? Then you need to subscribe to our Patreon page, and this is how you do it. First thing, head to our site, patreon.com/audiojudo. Our Patreon site is the only place you're going to find all the extras that we work so hard to provide. There are Judo Chops, which are mini episodes. There are bits that are taken out of episodes for whatever reasons, some bloopers, some full interviews with artists like Steve Hackett from Genesis. We have 3 tiers currently. There is the Shout It Out Loud tier, which would only cost you $1 in the US. For that amount, you get a shout out by name at the end of each episode. For $5 a month, little step up, the front row tier, you get a shout out in each episode, early access to full episodes, and access to all the bonus content. With a more significant investment, $20 a month, the Backstage Pass tier, you get everything that is available at the other tiers, a special personalized gift from Kyle and I. Most importantly, after paying for 1 year, you get to host an episode of Audio Judo with me and Kyle on the album of your choosing. We have completed several of these. They're a ton of fun. You can find the link to our Patreon account on our website, audiojudo.com. But if you can't find it there, it is patreon.com/audiojudo. Thanks for subscribing. And now back to the pro. Hey,
Hey, welcome back.
Maggot Brain.
Yeah, opens right up with the title track. This one's written by Eddie Hazel and George Clinton, and it's often considered an instrumental, though it does have some words. It opens with a spoken word monologue by George Clinton, where he refers to the maggots in the mind of the universe.
Hell yeah.
And then this song proceeds into what is an absolutely mind-bending 10-minute and 20-second a guitar solo, essentially.
Yeah.
That is this fuzzy, psychedelic, crazy thing.
Right. So let's go ahead and start the record with a 10.5-minute long, acid-washed and influenced song with very few words that just may include one of the top 5 guitar solos of all time. I mean,
Yeah.
shit. Okay. I remember the first time I heard this solo back in 1988. So it was an episode of a show called Headphones Only on 98.7 WLLZ in Detroit, by the way. That's Wheels, WLLZ.
Wheels.
It used to air at midnight on Sunday nights, and it was something that I did not miss this show for a long time. I used to try to get other people to listen as well, but people really didn't devote time to stuff like that. But I loved it. So it consisted of all the best songs that were the perfect usage of headphones, panning, spatial distance, all that stuff. And the very first song I remember hearing on it was off of Jimi Hendrix's debut album, and the song was Third Stone from the Sun. Hearing songs that I knew from the radio in this context was so eye-opening to what proper mixes could do for music. And this song was no different. It was unlike anything I had ever heard before. First of all, the mix is phenomenal, but it's because it's so different. There's all kinds of musicians playing in this song, and he mixed them almost completely out.
Yeah.
Totally in the background, buried so far that you could tell that they were there, but they were completely irrelevant to the rest of the song, because the most important thing was the guitar solo, which I'm sure you have plenty about.
I do, yeah. So let's start this out. This is a little clip of the opening monologue here.
Mother Earth is pregnant for the 3rd time. for y'all have knocked her up. I have tasted the maggots in the mind of the universe. I was not offended, for I knew I had to rise above it all or drown in my own shit.
It's pretty good.
So freaking great.
It was interesting watching you do it in the background. So,
Oh, well,
uh,
I've heard it a lot.
so for this guitar solo, supposedly it was recorded in one take. George Clinton, having just taken some LSD himself, asked Eddie Hazel to play the guitar as if he had just learned that his mother was dead. George instructed him to picture that day what Eddie would feel like, how he would make sense of his life, and how he would take a measure of everything that was inside of him and let it out through the guitar. And this is part of what he came up with.
Mm, 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 mm.
Crazy.
Heavy stuff.
Yeah.
Especially under the influence of hallucinogens, to be told, hey, picture your mom dead and then deal
Yeah,
with
right.
how's that going to work for you? And then George Clinton went back and treated the solo with all kinds of delay and echo and effects and phasing and panning and all kinds of weird shit going on. And there's reasons why John Frusciante from Red Hot Chili Peppers and Childish Gambino cite this song as such a huge influence, because it's an
Yeah.
incredibly powerful solo. It's very emotional. It's very raw, and it's played in one take, and it's just like, fuck, it's so good.
Yeah. Eddie has gone back to say, he used a ton of fuzz and wah effects on this. And he was super inspired by Jimi Hendrix. And then, like you said, George went in and added delay and echo plexers in the mixing process. Um, yeah. And like I said, unbelievably, 10 minutes and 20 seconds, and it goes all over the place. Here's another little clip similar to similar to the second one, but also totally different.
Such a great song.
Yeah, Matthew just said in the background there while we were chatting, he said you can see why this would be the perfect song to listen to in headphones while you were really, really stoned. And it's like, yeah, this makes perfect sense.
Well, it
It's
does.
amazing for that.
Yeah.
One other thing I thought was super interesting about this, just from doing a little bit of research on it, is generally songs like this that are very long, this is 10 minutes and 20 seconds, don't get a lot of radio play. A lot of times they're referred to as like bathroom break songs,
Yep.
where when there's some radio DJ who's like, I really need to go, they're like, here's Maggot Brain by Funkadelic, and then they get 10 minutes. They know they can run use the restroom.
For 10 minutes.
Interestingly, though, this might be the most played long song of all time. So From 1976 to 1995, a guy named DJ Bill BLF Bash Freeman had this tradition of playing the song in its entirety every Sunday morning at 1:30 a.m. on 100.7 WMMS in Cleveland,
Fuck yeah,
sort of
Cleveland.
as a signal to last call for a lot of the bars and restaurants around town. That same tradition was picked up by other DJs throughout the area, notably a guy named Mr. Classic, who hosted the Saturday Night Live House Party on 98.5 WNCX in Cleveland until he left in 2019. So currently, a guy named Kenny Kidd keeps the tradition alive by playing the song to end all of his all request Saturday night shows at 12 a.m. Eastern Standard Time every Sunday morning. So this song got tons of play every single week,
Yeah.
just as like a hey, we're wrapping it up for the night. Here you go. I think that's cool.
It is cool, and it's it's an incredibly powerful guitar solo.
Yeah.
Like there's good guitar solos, there's great guitar solos. This one's just you. I think you used the term mind bending, and that's really how it is.
Can you get to that?
So while listening to this album on headphones, or at least the first song anyway, it inspired me to buy the album right after I heard it all those years ago. But I certainly wasn't ready necessarily for what came after that song. I was familiar and enjoyed what some might say is quote unquote white funk. Red Hot Chili Peppers, Royal Crescent Mob, bands like that. I dabbled a little bit in bands like Fishbone and stuff, which was more of a Scottish funk band. So not Scottish, Scottish.
Scottish.
I was not familiar with the real funk, or what George Clinton called simply the funk. It was a song that starts, this song in particular, starts like a typical song from the late 60s and early 70s. That's the sound. But then the vocals enter, and you're transported right away into that experience. It sounds urban. I wish there was a way to explain it without sounding a certain way, but it sounded like Detroit in the 1970s. This sound, you know? Can you dig it? I knew that you could. Singing on the song, I'm sure you had the backup singers for Isaac Hayes, a group called Hot Buttered Soul.
Hot Buttered Soul, such a good name.
Consisted of Pat Lewis, Diane Lewis, and Rose Williams. And that sound is so freaking good, and it just grooves the song even more. That the sound of their vocals.
Yeah. This is a cool song too. That's the message here is that it's about the karmic consequences of taking advantage of someone who loves you for your own pleasure. That was pretty cool.
Yeah,
in case you're not familiar with that idea, karma, not in the, there's this sort of modern idea that karma is, do good things and good things will happen to you, and do bad things and bad things will happen to you.
Fair enough.
But it's an ancient Indian spiritual concept that refers to an action, work, or deed and its effects or consequences, sometimes thought of as reincarnative cause and effect. Meaning that if you have a lot of if you do a lot of bad things now, you will not only be reincarnated as something that is lesser on the grading of beings, but your life as that lesser being will be much worse, and it will be much harder for you to do good things so that you can move your way back up that.
Bummer.
Very interesting, but
right. But
it's
on the
also
surface, go ahead.
Oh, no, I would say this is also in the same vein of karma. This is a reincarnation of an earlier song by the Parliament called What You've Been Growing.
True story. From the Parliament. But what appears to be like a song really on the surface, appears to be a song about financial hardships, is an anti-love song in disguise.
Yeah.
You say that you're basing your entire relationship on a physical aspect of the experience, and eventually that's going to run out. You have nothing left. So if you write a check, he says in the song, if you write a check with love and kisses, that check will eventually come back with insufficient funds because it isn't really based on anything real. It's a good concept for a song. Yeah. I think a lot of that just blows right past people. It's a cool song.
Right, and it sounds like this.
Base your love on credit, and in your loving days are done. Church shoes sign with love and kisses later come back, sign insufficient and funk. Can you get? I wanna know if you can get to that. Can you get? Can you get? I wanna know if you can get to that. Can you get? Can you get? I wanna know if you can get to that. Can you get? Can you get? I wanna know if you can get to that. Can you get?
It is. It's an amazing song. Also of note here, co-written by George Clinton and Ernest Harris. Um, Ernie was actually a composer, songwriter, performer who did a ton of work with George Clinton through the years. Some of his best works were co-written with Ernie Harris. So
Indeed.
yeah,
Hit it and quit it.
Hit it and quit it.
I don't. Do you know what this song is about?
No idea.
Me either. I think it's about baseball.
Right? It's about baseball at the end of your baseball career.
Hit it.
One last hit, and then you get to quit and
then
go
you
out on
quit.
top.
And this
Home
is
run, done with
quit.
career.
This is the proper
Yeah.
funk, though. This is
It
the
is.
funk. This song is so good. That bass part, so good. William
right?
Billy Bass Nelson.
Billy Bass Nelson, co-written by him as well with George Clinton.
He quit the band, as you mentioned, after a financial dispute with George Clinton. Something that
I wonder if he hit George Clinton first
and then quit it.
and then quit the band. Be curious to know.
Obviously, there's a lot of foreshadowing there that people keep quitting over financial difficulty with George Clinton.
Yeah,
This
could be a thing.
Just keeps on happening.
But yeah, this also kind of is, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but this is another song that speaks to the sexual liberation that took place in the 60s. Because in the 50s, a song like this would have been absolutely controversial. The idea that you could have a sexual relationship that doesn't require some type of emotional or long-term commitment associated with it was unthinkable. And by 1971, you can hit it and quit it. And that's totally acceptable and everybody's fine with it. So
Hit it and quit it.
yeah, and it sounds like this.
I don't think I ever noticed that before, just right now. That's weird.
Yeah. Matthew just mentioned that this has a very like Frank Zappa quality to it. If you pull the vocals back a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, it very much does. I'd be curious to know if Frank Zappa took inspiration from Funkadelic. I'm sure that he did.
They were all kind of contemporaries right around that time.
Yeah. I also was very curious to know about this. Is this the origin of the term hit it and quit it?
I don't know. I was looking for that as well.
I tried so hard to find it, and I couldn't, I didn't really dig too deep into it. I mean, just some cursory internet searches. Because
Google search is all hit it
Yeah.
and quit it, hit it and quit it, hit it and
oh
quit it.
no, I was at work. Oh God. Sorry, boss. No, but I don't know if it is or not, but I could absolutely see, because this would have been right around the time that a phrase like this could have come into existence, I think. So maybe,
Maybe.
who knows?
I'm going to go ahead and say maybe.
You and your folks, me and my folks.
This song is so damn slinky and groovy.
Yeah.
Vocals provided by Billy Bass. Song has these great blues vibes throughout it. So this kind of funk, as opposed to like later 80s funk, 90s funk, was never limited to just slap bass and cool vocals. There's so much more at work here. This blending, like I mentioned, this blending of Motown, of soul, of blues, of hard rock, and funk is what gave this type of music its quality. There was so much to it. We talked about, I mentioned Let's Get It On by Marvin Gaye.
Yeah.
And that album is widely considered to be one of the best albums of all time. And if you side by side them, what does that one have that this one doesn't? I'd say in some places that album, Let's Get It On, is more inaccessible than this one. especially with
I would
like
definitely agree.
5 to 6 minutes of kind of nothing, just like sounds. But this
Yeah.
one, it grooves, and this song is one of the best on here. This song is much more about the class experience than most of the other songs on this record,
Yeah.
speaking
It's
directly
also
to the poor. Go ahead.
yeah, and it's also got a very good like a strong theme of unity here.
Yeah,
They're literally saying like, "Hey, if you bring your folks and I bring my folks together, we can form a better society." And he's like you said, he's specifically here is talking about disenfranchised Black Americans,
Mhm.
but he's also talking to white people that are listening to this, saying like, "Hey, you want to help? You get your folks together, I'll get my folks together. We can come together and we can do better. We can make things better for everybody. We just have to listen to each other and understand one another and realize that we're all here together." And then we grow bigger, and you know what? Hey, now we can grab even more of our folks, and you can grab even more of your folks. Your folks. That's hard to say for me for some
Froaks,
reason.
you're Froaks.
Folks, your folks.
Yeah, Froaks.
Everybody can come together, and we can have a movement, and we can actually make real changes that would be good and positive for society.
Yeah, the lyrics in the
Um,
song it says, "But if in our fears we don't learn to trust each other, and if in our tears we don't learn to share with your brother, you know that hate is going to keep multiplying, and you know that man is going to keep right on dying." This is not that dissimilar from what Marvin was talking about on the
yeah,
song "Brother, Brother." It is a familiar and unfortunately a much too used refrain for the urban experience that brothers are dying, the fact that
yeah,
they're still not cared for, still marginalized, and end up being able not being able to push past those boundaries. Right? It sucks,
yeah,
but the song is awesome.
yeah. It sounds like this.
Let me hear you say, yeah, yeah. Your folks, my folks, my folks, your folks, everyone folks, everyone folks, yeah. Your thing, my thing, my thing, your thing, all got a thing, yeah. And it's a very good thing.
Me and my
Guest one. There he is.
one thing that I would love to know, Matthew, since you have a physical copy in front of you, was that an original pressing that you had?
No, it's an import.
Okay. Is Judy Jones credited on this song?
No.
Okay. So apparently originally on some of the original copies, Judy Jones was mistakenly given writing credit on this song on the cover. I don't know who that is. I don't know why she was suddenly given writing credit on there.
I was about to say, who's Judy Jones?
Yeah, I have no idea. I couldn't find any. It's such a common name that searching for Judy Jones is just like here's a billion people named Judy Jones.
I should
So
check to see if I'm randomly credited on anybody's record.
you might be randomly credited. You probably are intentionally credited on somebody's record somewhere. But
That'd be nice.
yeah, but very interesting that it's like, how did somebody get accidentally credited for writing a song? Weird.
I don't know.
But
Typo.
typo maybe.
Someone carried the wrong list into the column. And
I mean, the only thing that I could think of would be that maybe she was like the secretary filing all the names or something.
she just stuck her own name in there.
And she just didn't like intentionally, but just like happened to put her name on there while she was like doing something like, here's all the names signed Judy Jones to prove that it was her. And then they're like, and Judy Jones. All right. Like,
I like it better.
I don't
if
know.
She purposely did it. Like that
she's just
story
like,
better
fuck
if
you
she
guys.
just-
I'm taking writing credit. Bam.
I like that much better.
Yeah. Flip this baby over to the B side. Super Stupid.
What would an album be from the 1970s if it didn't have at least one song completely devoted to cocaine?
Yeah.
You
Oh
know?
man. And this is such a good one. Eddie Hazel on the lead vocals here. Supposedly, the story behind this song is based on a true story. According to Harvey McGee, who is not a made-up person, but actually a close friend of the band,
Yeah, yeah.
Eddie and the band were performing in Boston. Eddie was, in the mood for some cocaine, as you get sometimes. So he went out and he came back with what he thought was cocaine. Set up a couple of lines on the table, snorted them both, and according to McGee, quote, His eyes got wide and his nose started running, end quote. It turned out it was not cocaine, but actually skag, which is a nickname for heroin.
Yeah, it's
he-
so go ahead.
So you can see Harvey McGee tell this story on YouTube. Search for PTV Super Stupid, and you can see the interview where he tells this exact story. It's great.
Yeah, the
But-
lyrics go like this at the beginning. Super stupid, bought a 5-cent bag, thought it was Coke, but it was skag. Super stupid, took a 1 and 1, then his eyes began to bug, his nose began to run. I mean, that tells the story right there. Super stupid. Who's super stupid? Eddie
Yeah.
Hazel's super stupid. That sounds
However-
like a very bad day.
Yeah. For being super stupid, though, mind blowing guitar solo in this.
Oh yeah.
Another one. Just
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
whoa. Sounds like this.
Super stupid, what if I said bad? Thought it was cool, but it was scared. Super stupid, took a 1 and 1, and his eyes began to bug, his nose began to run. Oh, stupid with your up and down, your maggot brain, your grizz and frown. Super stupid, your engineer, you love to fight, and the winner is fear.
It does sound like Jimmy.
It does sound a ton like Jimi Hendrix.
that was a
and
very
definitely
bad
some
day.
influences there, but yeah,
Very bad day
probably
for
was
him.
a shit day.
And it seemed to be his MO for his duration with the band. He left Funkadelic due to financial disputes, as we have mentioned. And he
Mhm.
would continue to perform and record with members of the band and George Clinton and Parliament and P-Funk and all those bands on and off through the 70s and 80s. But he had a lifetime of addiction and abuse and run-ins with the law, and because of it, and he ultimately passed away in 1992 at age 42 from liver failure.
Yeah.
So clearly he was very hard on his body. And this song again travels that line between funk and blues and rock. And it's such a good jam. And the drummer shines. He shines on this song just like he shines on the last song. Tiki Fullwood played on this one and played on this record. Varying reports why he left the band. Some say it was the financial stuff. Some say it was the acid eating contest.
Yeah. The drug freak out.
That, or they said it may have been because of his drug use, although that seems difficult to believe
Yeah.
considering they were all constantly strung out.
I mean, can you imagine being in a band like this and the band gets together and has an intervention? Hey, you're doing too many drugs.
We're gonna have to
you need to
get rid of you.
we're gonna have to let you go. Like
What? And he played with Clinton.
they're literally
on and off.
they're dropping tabs before. Hey man, look, you're just
You're just too
doing too
high.
much. You need to.
He played sporadically with Clinton through the rest of the 70s, but he'd passed away of stomach cancer in 1979.
Mm.
But this song, I don't know if you found that out. This song happens to be the only cover song ever played by Audioslave,
I saw that. Yeah.
which seems like a really weird choice lyrically, but musically, I could see how it would work.
Yeah.
But yeah,
and their
that's-
cover's pretty good. I went and listened to it real quick the other day. It's pretty good.
I do like it.
Yeah. Back in Our Minds.
So this whole album flip flops between these weird tripped out songs about drugs or zipping through the universe in your mind, and these very urban, class conscious songs about keeping together and watching out for your brothers. This being the latter, but just for good measure, this song is weird sounding, very tripped out with this urban message. So it has a little bit of both, and then it has this weird whoop, tweak sound. Whoop, whoop,
Yeah,
is
I love
really
that.
annoying by the middle of the song. That had I been really high when I was listening to it, I would have want to like run down the street, like, no, make it stop.
Get out of my brain.
But the lyrics are so good, right? We don't fight no more. We done close that door this time for sure. We can't stand no more fussing and a cussing each other when we're supposed to be brothers living in this world we all live in. It's essentially the same message of Marvin Gaye, but delivered with a little
Yeah.
more strangeness and a little more funk.
Yeah, I love this song, and it sounds like this. Doom 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 doom. Doom 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 doom. Doom 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 doom.
After a while,
Doom
that's
doom
all
doom
I hear.
doom doom. It definitely, it's a weird little standout noise, and it's one of those things that has been sampled countless times because I know that I've heard it in other songs before.
What,
So either they're replicating it by playing whatever they did to play that, or they've sampled it from this. But great, fun little song with a message, which is cool.
I like messages.
Yeah. Wars of Armageddon.
9.5 minute long funky freak out to end
Oh
the
my
record,
God.
where drummer Tiki Fullwood just lets it all hang out.
Yeah.
Just so much so that he was invited to play with Miles Davis after he recorded this, which he did.
Yeah.
And if Miles comes looking for you, then, you know, that's probably pretty good. This song just kind of throws everything at the wall. Not the babies. but there's
Literally.
babies crying, people yelling, "Goddamn, shut that baby up."
Yeah.
There's this wild freeform improv. It's a protest song. It's an urban song. It's a song about sex. It has another stellar solo by Hazel. All this drum work. It's got phasing and echo. Everything. It's got weird subway announcements, cuckoo clocks, all kinds of weird shit all over the place. It's nuts.
I love the part where the protesting goes from, because it starts out power to the people.
Oh,
And so basically the story behind this
I'll let you
song
handle
is
this.
that
Yeah.
they start out saying they want freedom, right? And then they say power to the people, they want power.
Right.
And then they start to change it to power to the Peter,
Yeah.
as in, you know,
Yes. But then they change it again.
and then they change it again, power to the pussy,
Correct.
and then Peter, or pussy to the Peter. Is it pussy to the Peter or Peter to the pussy? I forget
Yeah,
which.
there's quite an evolution in the song.
Yeah, but the
about where it goes
underlying
from.
meaning of it, which is something that I was just like, oh, this is just funny. And then I actually started to think about it and saw some other people that had mentioned this as well. But the idea behind it is that people who start out searching for freedom and promoting themselves is like, hey, we're the people that are going to get you freedom. We're going to fight for your freedom. And then they start to want power. And then once they want power, they want sex. And then once they want sex, they want to begin dominating the people that they have sex with to continue to build their power.
Oh.
That was very interesting, and it's very subtle, and it's because this song is so long, it's stretched out over about 8 minutes of the 9 minutes, so you
Yeah.
can't really hear the whole thing. But very, very interesting, and not something that I would have ever put together. But yeah, like you said, there's a bunch of sound effects in here. There's a bunch of, like, there's a cow mooing, and then it ends with a nuclear explosion before it cuts back to a weird little funk thing before it goes away, which is a little weird.
It's all over the place.
But it sounds like this.
on, so
Brother.
on, brother.
So, dude, Tiki Full would absolutely going bonkers nuts
Bonkers.
with the drum set on there. Just crazy. Also, got to point out, weird shout out to Spiro Agnew in there. Nixon's vice president from 69 to 73. One of only 2 vice presidents so far to have resigned while in office, by the way.
So far.
He resigned because he was being investigated by the United States Attorney for the District of Maryland on suspicion of criminal conspiracy, bribery, extortion, and tax fraud unrelated to Watergate, by the way.
By the
So
way.
different criminal things. Agnew actually took kickbacks from contractors during his time as Baltimore County executive and governor of Maryland. Payments had continued into the time he was vice president, at which, and like I said, he was not implicated in the Watergate scandal, but he actually pled no contest and got off with a single charge of tax evasion and then resigned from being the vice president. Before all of that, when he was county executive in Maryland, he oversaw a number of desegregation disputes involving private property, and he appeared to prioritize law and order, showing particular aversion to any kind of demonstrations. During the incident, well, so the 16th Street Baptist Church in Alabama was bombed during his time in office, in which 4 children died. And he actually refused to attend a memorial service at a Baltimore church for them. And he denounced some planned demonstrations in support of the victims, which was, real great move on his part.
Sure.
Later on as governor, he supported the civil rights movement, but he deplored the militant actions and tactics used by some black leaders, to quote him, which led to a lot of problems. After the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. on April 4th, 1968, there was this widespread rioting and disorder that took place across the U.S., probably rightfully so. When this reached Baltimore on April 6th, it lasted for 3 days and city burned. Agnew actually declared a state of emergency and called out the National Guard, which caused more than 4,000 people to be arrested. 6 people died. And the fire department had to respond to 1,200 fires, the majority of which were lit by the National Guard.
Is he on this record?
Agnew?
Yeah.
He's just mentioned. They say
he mentions him?
Yeah, it mentions Agnew, where he says the part where she says, "Hey, Spiro Agnew, boop boop a doo."
I did not hear.
So, yeah. So,
That's just another
anyways,
Tuesday
he
in
then
2025.
after
Right.
those riots, he then summoned more than 100 moderate black leaders to the state capitol, where instead of like giving some constructive dialogue, like, "Hey, we need to move beyond this. What can we do to rebuild?" He basically castigated them for their failure to control more radical elements within their communities and accused them of cowardly retreat or even complicity. Well, it's hard for me to say. Complicity
There you go.
in the riots and actions. So, yeah, real piece of shit. After he resigned as vice president, he stayed out of the spotlight, but continually blamed Zionists for forcing him to resign until his death. Yeah, so wanted to mention
else
that
you
he's a
gonna blame?
huge piece of shit. Anytime I hear about Spiro Agnew outside of Futurama, I have to mention that he was a huge piece of shit and maybe at least an equal piece of shit to Richard Nixon. So, in my
I
personal
thought you just
opinion.
wanted to say boop boopy doo
Boop boopy doo.
every time you hear.
I do love to
Spiro
say boop
Agnew.
boopy doo, though. Yeah. And that's
It's
it. That's
it's
Maggot
a great
Brain.
choice. That is a great choice for a record, though.
I'm
love
so
this record.
I'm so glad we finally did it. It really is like it's a pretty short album. It has 2 really long tracks on it. But it's worth a listen for everybody out there. It's something that's nice to put on. It's regardless of what so many people claim, it's not evil. It's not, foreboding death music. It's a great album to listen to. It's fun at times. It has serious messages at sometimes, but it delivers them in a really great way. And it's wonderful music.
Yeah, you need to let us know what you think about Maggot Brain by Funkadelic. You can get a hold of us at facebook.com/audiojudo or Instagram at audio_judo, or you can send us an email at info@audiojudo.com, or you can check us out on YouTube at youtube.com/@audiojudo and watch any of the last several episodes on there. If you're really curious to
I
see,
think we've got
what-
about 30 episodes on there
something
now.
like that. Yeah, if you
Yeah.
want to see stuff that you might not hear if you listen to it in a more normal podcast approach,
Yeah.
because as we act kind of sillier on video, and then Randy has to go and excise it like a surgeon.
Yeah, try to
Take all
fix
the
it.
stupid shit out of it.
And the trick is that you can't edit the video quite as much as you edit the audio. So all of the ums and ers and ers are in the YouTube videos.
Stop it.
So
Don't stop. Already, stop it. Stop it.
now you're in your own head. Ha ha.
I just did it. Do you have any Patreon names to talk about? See, I'm purposely trying to avoid saying
I think I do have some Patreons that we can talk about. Diane and Simon C, our UK consultant, both the shout out loud tier. Thank you so much. John R at the front row seats tier. Thank you so much. Christian S, David W, Kristen K, Michael A, Michael S, and Scott K. Thank you all so much at the backstage pass tier.
Guest one keeps showing up on this podcast.
Thank
He
you all
just
so
shows
much.
up.
We could not do this without all of you.
Absolutely not. And we have episodes coming up from In Excess,
Oh yeah.
Porcupine Tree, Genesis,
Ooh.
Jamiroquai. Someone's
Finally.
very excited in this room.
Randy's clapping.
Yeah. A lot of cool stuff coming up. Was there more?
Oh no, I got to 4, but it was this 4. So I had my pinky down and it's hard for me to do that. So I was like, I thought you were going to list a 5th one and then you didn't. So I was just like, I should have gone with these 4, not these 4.
So lots of fun
Why
stuff.
did I use the thumb? Lots of fun stuff coming up. Matthew's burping up some beer over there. Lots of fun episodes coming up. Some really fun ones coming up. Fun.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm fine.
Fun.
So we hope you
fun,
come back
yes.
in 2 weeks and join us. Until then, have a good one. We'll talk to you soon.
Take care. Bye.